The room is open now?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. Essie, do we have enough participants to start with? Would you want to check if we can give maybe some few minutes more for others to join?
We have a number of people in the room already, sir. I think if you'd like, I think we can go ahead and start. Thank you.
So we can start? Is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Distinguished colleagues, friends, colleagues, experts in the house, stakeholders generally. Thank you very much for joining this critical technical session on building climate resilience in Nigeria, a comprehensive approach. This is a pre-summit event. Summit, Nigeria Economic Summit number 30. So this is part of the countdown activities towards that event coming up. And so as we gather here today, the urgency of addressing the mounting climate crisis in our nation becomes increasingly evident. The impacts of climate change are no longer distant threats, but present realities affecting our communities, economies, and ecosystems. Nigeria, unfortunately, occupies a precarious position in the Global Climate Vulnerability Index. The Global Adaptation Index in 2021 ranked Nigeria as the 53rd most vulnerable country and the 6th least ready to adapt to climate change globally. Environmental degradation, such as desertification, deforestation, and soil erosion, reduces agricultural productivity, compounded by erratic weather patterns affecting crops and livestock. Indeed, just to quickly repeat that, in other words, the consequences of environmental degradation, including desertification, deforestation, and soil erosion, are starkly apparent in our declining agricultural productivity and food security challenges. We would not like to say anything about it. What's one of the reasons why people are protesting? They talk about food and the other challenges. Moreover, erratic weather patterns continue to worsen these issues, posing significant risk to livelihood and economic stability. I'd like to just share a very brief story that underscores the gravity of our situation. I know a small village in the northern part of the country. Farmers have witnessed their once fertile lands turn barren due to prolonged droughts. This has not only affected their livelihood, but also the food supply for the entire region, and indeed, the entire country. Such stories are becoming all too common. We all know that, highlighting the urgent need for you and I, and indeed every other person out there, to take action. It is imperative that we move beyond mere awareness of these challenges and translate our understanding into concrete actions. We continue to talk about mitigation. How we are able to build resilience becomes increasingly challenging You recall what happened to the supply chain during the 2022 flood that cut the southern and northern parts of the country into two, especially Kogi area. Taking forest and fuel to the northern part became a challenge. Supply chain disruption. This session provides a platform to explore comprehensive strategies for building climate resilience. We will dive into critical areas such as infrastructure development, ecosystem restoration, community engagement, policy and governance, and international cooperation. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the tireless effort of individuals and organizations who have been at the forefront of climate resilience initiatives in Nigeria. Some of them are part of those that are here and that we actually speak to some of these issues. Your dedication and hard work are truly commendable and serve as an inspiration to all of us. I'm confident that through robust discussion and knowledge sharing, we can identify practical solutions and develop a roadmap for a climate resilient Nigeria. Let us harness the collective expertise in this room to forge a path towards a sustainable, prosperous future for our nation. These pre-summit events, once again, I would like to say, form part of the larger conversation regarding the forthcoming Nigeria Economic Summit that has the theme, collaborative action for growth, stability, and competitiveness. Speaks to the issues that have inhibited Nigeria's trajectory to growth, stability, and competitiveness in many respects. And we're putting our finger on one of them, resilience issues. Our colleagues, gentlemen, and indeed, those that are part of this beautiful program, just to say that we encourage you to stay tuned, be part of the conversation. The issues that we're talking about calls for a holistic approach to climate resilience in our policy making, institutional and regulatory framework and infrastructure, just as we look at other measures in dealing with these challenges. I invite you all to actively participate in this session, share your insights, and commit to specific action that will contribute to building a resilient Nigeria today. Kindly insert your comments, your remarks, whatever it is that you have in mind to say that can add more color to the conversation, put it there in the chat. If you are given an opportunity to speak, please, let's keep to our time. And indeed, we have experts that will be speaking to all of these issues. Once again, thank you very much for joining, and kindly stay tuned and remain muted throughout this session. We would like to take the welcome address, and the private sector co-chair of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group Sustainability Policy Commission Steering Committee, Mr. Osagie Okunbo, will be welcoming all of us with a welcome address. Sir, we're all ears waiting to hear you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Itwa. Can you please confirm you can hear me?
Loud and clear.
Thank you so much. Heads of ministries, departments and agencies, captains of industry, heads of associations, donor communities, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm indeed delighted to welcome distinguished and highly esteemed participants to this pre-summit event titled Building Climate Resilience in Nigeria, a Comprehensive Approach, which is hosted by the NESG Sustainability Policy Commission. As Dr. Itwa just said, this is one of the pre-summit events of the 30th NESG Summit, NES 30, jointly organized by the NESG and the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, geared towards engaging stakeholders in a series of virtual conversations and sessions in the weeks leading to the 30th Nigerian Economic Summit, which is, as we heard earlier, scheduled to hold from October 14th to 16th this year. If you have not yet registered, I kindly request you to visit the NESG website, nesgroup.org now. Nigeria, Africa's most populous country, faces significant challenges in building climate resilience due to the increasing frequency and severity of natural disasters exacerbated by climate change. We just had one example that Dr. Ito just mentioned in the recent past, based on the flooding that we experienced a couple of years back. This alarming situation calls for urgent and accelerated action to address the country's vulnerability to climate-related hazards. The World Bank highlights that despite Nigeria's impressive economic growth over the last decade, there is an urgent need to ensure this growth is resilient to both short-term shocks and long-term stresses. Therefore, economic resilience must encompass protection against climate-related shocks, which are increasingly becoming a significant threat to sustainable development in our country. Nigeria's economic growth is heavily dependent on sectors that are vulnerable to climate change, such as agriculture, oil and gas, and fisheries. Ensuring that these sectors can withstand and adapt to climate-related impacts is crucial for the country's long-term prosperity. According to the Brookings Institution, 2022, the impact of climate change on Nigeria's environmental and socio-economic systems is compounding the country's already existing fragility risks. Climate change is not only causing direct environmental harm, but also exacerbating social and economic inequalities. Vulnerable populations, particularly those in rural areas, are disproportionately affected by climate-related disasters, leading to increased poverty and displacement. The severity of the climate crisis in Nigeria necessitates immediate and comprehensive action. To build climate resilience, there is a need for key strategies, including infrastructure development, ecosystem restoration, community engagement, policy and governance initiative, and international cooperation. By adopting these strategies and fostering stronger governance and stakeholder engagement, Nigeria can build greater resilience on climate change, ensuring sustainable development and to pave the way for a more prosperous future for our country. Building climate resilience is crucial, not only for safeguarding the environment, but also for ensuring sustainable economic growth and social stability. This event today aims to increase awareness and understanding of climate risks and resilience, emphasizing the need for actionable plans and strategies to enhance climate resilience through a private sector-driven approach, while promoting private and public collaboration and commitment among stakeholders to support these efforts. Once again, I want to extend our profound appreciation to every participant and to the panelists in particular for accepting our invitation, and look forward to having a very productive session. Finally, once again, I urge you once again to register for the 30th Nigeria Economic Summit through the NESG website, which I laid out earlier, to join other experts and stakeholders in articulating collaborative action for growth, stability, and competitiveness of our country. May God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, our co-chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Osagi Okumbo, for that welcome address. We are to take the keynote address from the Honorable Minister, Honorable Balarabe Abbas Lawal, the Honorable Minister of Environment of our Federation, Nigeria. I am aware that I've just been told that the director who represents him, I don't know if the director of PRS is here. Or we can go on with the panel and then the minister can take the keynote address before we close out. So thank you very much once again. I would like to hand over to Ms. Dolapo Kukoyi, who is the thematic lead, climate change under the Sustainability Policy Commission. Dolapo, we're waiting to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Itwan. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join. What I hope will be, and which has actually started as a very interesting discussion, and indeed one that is critical for us as a country. Just standing on existing protocols which have been well set by my bosses in our voluntary service. I'll stand on the existing protocols, and good afternoon to our distinguished panelists, our steering committee chair, Mr. Gumbo, and Dr. Itwa, who's our facilitator for the SPC, distinguished ladies and gentlemen who have joined us today. I will be moderating this panel, and a very erudite panel at that, and we will be speaking about going into the topic, which is climate resilience in Nigeria, a comprehensive approach. And we just to give a small background to our discussions before I introduce our panelists. For us as the Sustainability Policy Commission, one of our aims or action points for the year is to actually design and hopefully establish policy reform for ensuring that we have climate resilient infrastructure as a country. And this fits very much into, our theme for the summit, which is collaborative action for growth, stability, and competitiveness. And we thought that this session, pre-summit session, will be one that would hopefully kickstart things, quite apart from other things that we're doing, to start the discussions as to how we can ensure this growth and stability that we're talking about. Dr. Itoa has spoken in his opening remarks about how, we are at risk in many ways where we do not, have climate resilient infrastructure. So without much ado, I will not go into details. I'd like to introduce our panel so that we can get right into the topic. I will start with introducing Mr. Lukman Oshodi. He's CEO Arctic Infrastructure, and you can see his bio on the screen. He's a Commonwealth Professional Fellow and Project Director of Arctic Infrastructure, a multidisciplinary private organization with a broad focus on infrastructure delivery. He leads multiple study projects within the Heritage Ball Foundation, covering housing types, mortgage system for low-income groups. He's also technical lead for formulation of new housing funding architecture for the city of Lagos, and is under the auspices of Lagos State Ministry of Housing, also in conjunction with Heritage Ball and Arctic Infrastructure. So please do welcome with me, Mr. Lukman Oshodi. If you can give an electronic hand, that would be nice. We don't have sound effects. My next panelist is Dr. Folayinka Daniel. Dr. Folayinka is a highly experienced medical professional. She served in the Directorate of Disease Control, Lagos State Ministry of Health, where she worked meritoriously with the program officer in the implementation of malaria elimination program with the Lagos State government. Prior to her role as Chief Resilience Officer, she was Deputy Chief Resilience Officer for Lagos State. And for those of you who don't know the Lagos State Resilience Office, you'll be hearing about the case study.
It's breaking.
Okay. Can anyone else? Is it breaking?
I can hear you. It's not breaking. I can hear.
Okay. All right. Okay. For those of us who don't know about the Lagos State Resilience Office, we'll be hearing about it today and what their role is in ensuring resilience for a city like Lagos, which is our commercial center. My next panelist is Dr. Zainab Pisagi. Okay. And she is Deputy Director of Environment and Regional Planning at the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning. Dr. Zainab Pisagi is an expert in economic policy analysis with extensive experience in multilateral and bilateral diplomacy. She specialized in developing Nigeria's real sector, which encompasses agriculture and water resources, solid minerals, oil and gas, and MSMEs. Her expertise further extends to trade and investment with a focus on industry, trade and investment, including trade policy reviews, trade negotiations. So just speaking again to the issue of competitiveness, as Opisagi I see is well experienced, and hopefully it will be brought to the fore in our discussions today. My last but not least panelist is Mr. Henry Bassi. He is founder, CEO, Green Hub Africa Foundation, and he's an economist with expert knowledge in environmental sustainability with a bias for climate literacy and environmental education. He's a former US President Al Gore trained climate reality leader and lead in-country consultant with the World Resources Institute on nationally determined contributions and long-term low emission strategies, which includes the UN Conference of Party Negotiations. He's also convener of the annual UN Green Hub Africa World Environment Day Advocacy and Media Platform, which engages key stakeholders from government, civil society, and private sector to demystify climate change. Please do welcome all my panelists this afternoon, and we'll go straight into our discussions. Just to also say thank you very much to our panelists for taking the time. So without much ado, I will start with Mr. Lukman Oshodi, who will be making a presentation on the state of infrastructure in Nigeria's urban centers and key considerations for adapting climate resilience. Mr. Oshodi, you know our timing. So over to you. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and nice to be here. Just 1 second. I will try to be very quick about this so that I do not take too much time. So, as mentioned, the state of infrastructure in Nigerian urban center and key consideration for adapting to climate resilience. So that is what I'm going to look at this afternoon. And of course, the state of our infrastructure. How are we faring as a country in Nigerian cities? What is the position of Nigerian cities? How ready are we to withstand the climate stress and shocks? Are we there as a country, or are we still trying to catch up? And if we are trying to catch up, what are the approaches, what are the models that we are using to ensure that, yes, we are really getting our cities and we are getting our peoples prepared? So having said that, I will look at the introduction, which is the overview of Nigeria in terms of population and infrastructure needs, efforts of the federal government of Nigeria, efforts of the state government, recommendations for Nigerian cities. So this will be the highlight of my presentation this afternoon. So as we know, Nigeria is the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa.
Well, sure, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I need you to actually do full screen so that we can see. And I'm not sure that you're moving.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'm on the full screen here.
Okay.
I'm on the full
a
screen
slideshow. Is it on slideshow or is it me?
On a slideshow.
It needs to be on slideshow. Yes, please.
Yes, so that I'm on slideshow.
Okay, then it must be mine.
Is it better now?
No, you are not yet on slideshow. Just
no, you are not.
Slideshow, then the thing will. Because we are seeing all your slides. If you put it on slideshow, then you will be the only one seeing it.
Oh, okay. Just one moment then. Okay. Is it better now?
Up. No. Up. Go up to your PowerPoint.
Okay.
Do screenshot your PowerPoint first.
Okay. So I have started from the beginning here. Start the show from the first slide.
That should be.
Okay. Are we there? Can you see it clearly on the screen?
Please go on, sir. Just go on.
Okay. Okay. So as I'm saying, Nigeria, yes, is the largest country by virtue of a population of 229 million. The growth rate is at over 2.5%. So, and it is expected to get to 400 million by 2050. By 2050, it is expected to get to 400 million. So that shows the scale of what we are dealing with in terms of population and in terms of the necessity to be able to respond to the need and desire of this population from time to time. So as at the counting of today, Nigeria has over 1,200 cities and towns, and of course 19 of which with more than 1 million people. Lagos is the largest city by far with more than 27 million people.
Mr. Oshodi, we can't hear you. Just checking if everything is okay.
Yes.
But we can't see your slides. Perhaps you want to share them with essay. So maybe essay can take control if that's easier for you.
Okay. Just a 1 minute.
Apologies, ladies and gentlemen. So we can just get this right, please. I think this is
Mr. Oshodi, are you having challenges?
I think so.
You are muted.
Just a connection issue. Just a 1 minute. Just 1 minute, please. Thank you.
I think the connection issue is even general. I'm having challenges here as well.
Okay.
But go ahead.
So in this regard, I suggest that we all remove our videos and enhance the connectivity at least. Let's take off the video that we put on.
Mr. Oshodi, perhaps maybe we should move on to Dr. Daniel's presentation, and then once you send to essay, we start with yours again. Will that be okay? So that you can deal with this issue? Or are you close to getting
Okay,
ready?
I think that's fine. Let's just go with Dr. Daniel.
Okay, and then please send your slides to essay.
Yeah, I will do that right away.
After that.
Just copy me as well. And
Okay.
copy me too.
Okay.
It's not showing.
Okay. So Dr. Daniel, I think we can take your presentation now, and Dr. Daniel will be presenting a case study on the Lagos State Resilience Office and how Lagos State is preparing for the future. Dr. Daniel, over to you. Just checking that you are there.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Falain Daniel. I'm Chief Resilience Officer and CEO of the Lagos State Resilience Office. So as you all know, Lagos State is the smallest state in Nigeria. It has a landmass of 3,557 square kilometers, 40% of which is water. It has a 180-kilometer shoreline, an estimated population of over 26 million people, but growing every day as it's the financial capital of Nigeria, the melting point of different people. And one thing that you might remember about Lagos is that we don't say welcome to Lagos, we say this is Lagos. Just to not take everything so seriously. So for those of you that don't know, the Lagos State Resilience Office is the Lagos State's office responsible for improving the resilience of Lagos as a whole. The office was set up in 2018 as a multidisciplinary strategic planning office. So we have officers from health, environment, education, finance, budget and planning, energy and mineral resources, and the likes. And the office was set up to improve the resilience of Lagos State as a whole. So whether it's identifying resilience building initiatives for the state, which are aimed at improving our social, economic, physical, and environmental resilience. And we've been talking about resilience, but for us, we mean the capacity of Lagos to survive, adapt, and grow despite any acute shock or chronic stress that Lagos experiences now or might experience in the future. And when the office was set up in 2019, the work of the office at that time was divided into 3 phases, because that was the beginning. And there's no other office like this in Nigeria. As in, we're proud to say we're the only residence office in Nigeria, and we're just one of 4, I think, currently in Africa. So when the work started in 2019, the idea was, first of all, have a preliminary resilience assessment for Lagos State. And it was aimed at evaluating what are the strengths of Lagos, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities that exist for Lagos, and identifying what are the shocks and stresses that Lagos State was currently experiencing at the time or could experience in the future. Phase 2 of the work boiled around researching those identified challenges and identifying actions and collaborations that we could use to improve the state's resilience. And this led to the development of the Lagos Resilience Strategy. And in phase 3, which is where we are now, as we began to implement practical changes in the state based on the resilience strategy so that we could improve the resilience of the state as a whole, and also increase the collaborative city governance in the state. So when we did this work in 2019, we identified what were the top shocks that Lagos State was facing, what were the top stresses. And on your screen, as you find a list of the top shocks and stresses at that time. This was in 2019. But in 2024, we realized that these shocks and stresses are still relevant. As in, we were talking about riots and civil unrest, as in 2019, and eventually happened in 2020 with NSAS and the likes. But what we found, as in that was cross-cutting across all these issues, was climate change impacts. And we realized that whatever interventions that we were going to put forward at that time, as in we're going to address climate change impacts one way or the other, and it was important that we focused on this. And some people will ask, why is climate resilience, as in why is it important for us? As in for Lagos, the low-lying topography of the state makes us very vulnerable to, as that's the high table water in the state makes us particularly vulnerable to climate change impacts. But the main climate change impact drivers that we experience in Lagos are sea level rise, extreme heat, and extreme rainfalls. And this comes with all its own problems, whether it's coastal and lagoon flooding, coastal erosion, the heat waves, urban heat island effect, pollution, inland flooding, river flooding, tropical storms, and the likes. So we took it one step further. But like, if we do nothing as a state, as in what would it cost us? And because some people are still there that don't believe in climate change or don't believe that climate change impacts exist. So we assessed in 2022, what was the cost of inaction for us as a state? And it was estimated that if we did nothing by 2050, the cost of inaction for us as a state will be between $33 to $39 billion. That was 12 times our annual budget in 2021. Let's not even talk about what it will currently be now with the exchange rates. And what does this mean for us? It means that 14 of 20 local governments in Lagos will be inundated by water. We'll have more than 1.4 million people affected, more than 350,000 of which will be women. There'll be severe destruction and severe damage to infrastructure with disruptions as in cutting across our transport network, our power grid, communication network of over $5 billion. We have GDP losses of over 17 billion, as in just if we do nothing. But there was good news. If we decided to do something about it, the cost of action for us now will be about $9 billion. Still sounds like something very, very interesting. Anyway, so based on this, as in we went back to look at, as in what were the different plans that existed in the state. So we had the Lagos Resilience Strategy, which I mentioned earlier was released in 2020. Then based on the resilience strategy at the time, we released the Lagos Climate Action Plan. We also have our 30-year plan, which was released in 2022, which is the Lagos State Development Plan 2052, which all allude to initiatives that could help us improve our climate resilience. And in 2024, this year, we took a step further. We actually developed and publicly released what we call the Lagos State Climate Adaptation and Resilience Plan, which basically looks at 3 categories of interventions that could put Lagos on the pathway to resilience. One is interventions that help us to build resilience infrastructure and public spaces, whether it's our transportation, our power grids, our road networks, and also about building a climate-proof city. The second set of interventions that ensure resilient communities and protect vulnerable groups to ensure that we reduce the exposure of people living in the states to climate events, particularly the poor and the vulnerable. And the last set of interventions are interventions that help us to properly anticipate risk and improve our response in times of crisis. And also, we began to see that it was important to also begin to look at our policies so that we ensure that we have the capacity to effectively and promptly respond to climate risk disasters when they occur. This sounds like big, big English, but when it comes to it, there are practical solutions that we need to implement as a state. And so far, we've identified about 33 adaptation and resilience projects. And some examples are on your screen. Planting of climate resilience trees, construction of waste to energy plants, early warning systems for imminent weather events, construction and rehabilitation of our drains, both primary, secondary, and tertiary, restoration of about 11 hectares of mangrove, which would help us act as natural wave barriers, reducing inland flooding made common by sea level rise. And the last example on the screen is a reinforcement of 18 kilometers of our coastal embankment and building additional 10 kilometers of seawalls. As I mentioned earlier, we have a 180 kilometer shoreline. We would love to put in place some form of coastal zone protection across the entire 180 kilometers, but it's very, very expensive. So we are thinking about doing this in phases. I'm sure some of you are familiar with Eco-Atlantic City, which also helps us to protect a very, very important part of Lagos. So this haven't been without challenges, as in some of them have been inadequate funds, some have been inadequate buy-in from stakeholders. We've identified that we were not centrally coordinating our actions, and we also identified some gaps in the state's climate policies. But we were working around that. We've identified financing models that we can use to help us increase our access to funding. We're continuing stakeholder engagements. We're developing clear governance structures to oversee the implementation of our climate policies and plans. And we're also improving the state's climate policies around water quality, sanitation and hygiene, waste management and circularity, and climate resilience building codes, among others. But we've identified 3 major success factors for us, as in without which we would not be successful and we will not realize resilience evidence. One is mainstreaming resilience thinking and strengthening our institutional structures. The other one is collaborative engagements to connect people and resources, because we realize that not all the resources that we require are present in one sector. And also collaborative engagements to get more stakeholder buy-in. And the last one is monitoring and evaluation to track our projects, to track our progress, to ensure that we are actually achieving what it was that we set out to achieve. I will believe through this, we would have successful implementation, would improve our climate resilience, and realize resilience dividends for the state. Thank you very much.
Many, many thanks, Dr. Dania. Thank you. That was really, really great and very, very insightful for me, and I'm sure for most of us. In fact, I think if we finished now, there's a lot of takeaways that we have. So, Mr. Oshodi, are you ready? Just checking that Mr. Oshodi is ready.
Ready. Yes, very ready at this time.
Okay.
Yeah, he is, because he shared his
Okay.
PowerPoint.
I think we can just put up our videos so he can. Yeah, I think he's.
So very ready. Apologies for the.
Essie, are you sharing? Can any SG team please?
Okay. So can I go ahead? Hello.
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Thank you. Apologies for the break in transmission the other time. So, as I mentioned earlier, my focus will be on the infrastructure in Nigerian cities, and of course, adapting to climate resilience. Yes, quickly move to the next slide, please. Kindly move forward. Thank you. Okay, I will be looking at the overview of Nigerian cities, the infrastructure need, the climate risk, effort both from the federal government and the state government, the private sector, and a recommendation for Nigerian cities moving forward. So, as we know, the country is the largest in the sub-Saharan African region with the population of over 200 million. Move to the next slide. So with that places enormous responsibility on the country to be able to respond to the needs of this huge number of people. And of course, not just thinking about the current population, but what the population will likely be in the next, say by 2050. How do we really respond to the need of this if a growing population, if I may put it that way? What will the country need to do, and what will the country looks like when we get to about 400 million people in terms of climate resilience and responding to different shocks and stresses that come with climate impact. How will our infrastructure be able to withstand this pressure of 400 million people? So these are the issues that the country needs to be thinking. While we are thinking currently of what do we do, we equally need to look at what the future will look like. What are we doing to get ourselves prepared as a country? Yes. Let's move forward. So with the number of people, number of urban centers we have, about 1,200, with about 19 of them having more than 1 million population. Lagos with more than 25 million people is the largest, being the economic and commercial capital of the country. Another 34 cities have more than 500,000 inhabitants. So we have quite a large number of urban centers in Nigeria. But how resilient are these urban centers? Are they really prepared? Are they ready? And of course, how are they responding to different climate impact issues? So from north to the south, east to the west, quite a number of we have energy, we have transportation, we have housing, we have water, sanitation, healthcare, schools, communication. So all these are the key indicators that determine how ready are we, how strong are our infrastructure to be able to withstand quite a number of shocks, how vulnerable are these infrastructure, how are they being attended to, and what are the gaps that we are dealing with. Kindly move forward. In the northern part of the country, in the northern part of the country, at least we know that we are dealing with the issue of transboundary flooding. We are equally dealing with desertification, and of course, we are seeing the effect. If we look at the Nigerian economy, it is very clear that we are dealing with a climate sensitive economy, which revolve around agriculture, forestry, oil and gas extraction, manufacturing, and a different climate sensitive issue. And it is very clear from the statistics that we had from Dr. Daniel, it is very clear that urgent action needs to be taken. If we do not take action, the cost could be very significant. And if we do take action, the cost and value will be something that the country and its people will be of a main benefit to the country and its people. So from this, it is clear that the cost that we are dealing with around the infrastructure is quite enormous. And how do we raise this fund from the nationally determined contribution projected cost of about 177 billion by 2030? Where will this money come from? Is it from the budgetary allocation? Is it from a partnership funding? Is it from a different loans and grants? So all these are some of the issues that we need to think. We need to bring on our thinking cap, not only from the government side, but from the private sector side, from the NGO, and of course from the community side. So this requires good level of a collaborative effort to get our cities and of course to get our infrastructure to be able to be stronger and of course strengthen them to be able to withstand the different climate impacts. And if we look at the climate impact in different parts of the country, we'll be looking at the land use, how responsive our land use to different issues coming up in our cities. The flooding, which is quite prevalent from time to time, the urban pollution, sea level rise, fossil fuel-based energy, and transportation are some of the key climate challenges affecting our cities, and which we need to respond to as a people, whether in the private sector or in the government sector. Let's move to the next slide. So from what we are seeing, so we have a general climate vulnerability issue, and which has really put Nigeria, we are not in a good position when it comes to climate risk vulnerability. From the analysis given by Dr. Itua at the opening of this meeting, it is very clear that at a 53rd position for Nigeria, that is not a good one. And of course, around the transboundary flooding, which is which has becoming something of a yearly occurrence from Cameroon and Lagdo Dam down to River Niger, River Benue. These are issues, and of course, down to Bayelsa State, Warri, and a different number of states being affected by that transboundary flooding. This is something that we need to pay attention to. So at the eastern part of the country, we are dealing with a negative rainfall anomalies, intensive flooding, and of course erosion. In the west, we are dealing with inland flooding, sea level rise, and coastal flooding. So different regions of the country have some peculiarities regarding climate shocks that affect their infrastructure. But then there are generic issues that we are dealing with as a country. So if we are looking at the impact of all this, it is already affecting the food security, the heat wave that we experience from time to time. So all this needs to be really put in perspective in the process of developing different strategies and models that we address some of these climate concerns around our infrastructure. So to respond to these challenges, quite a number of states and of course the federal government is responding through different through different policies, programs, projects, and of course creating the necessary framework that can address some of these issues. Let's go to the next slide. So, at least we have seen one of the key outcome of a federal government effort in this regard, I will say, is the establishment of a National Council on Climate Change, which has been doing a good work in terms of mobilizing different partners to respond to the issues of climate change in Nigeria and infrastructure delivery. Of course, we have a Nigerian integrated infrastructure master plan, which has created a pathway that the country needs to take in terms of creating or delivering a different infrastructure that will enhance our climate resilience in different parts of Nigeria. So the implementation of this plan is another thing that we need to really seriously look into. The Nigerian Energy Transition Plan is equally a good one that is giving the pathway to renewable on how to, and of course, how to manage our energy value chain creatively. And the performance in that regard is equally a welcoming one. And of course, there is always a room for improvement. Quite a number of projects, the Great Green Wall, all these are being put together by the federal government to really guide the country in the path of resilience, climate resilience. Let's go to the next slide. So now looking at different cities across Nigeria, the first one that we look at is Abuja, which is the administrative capital of Nigeria. One thing is that Abuja is more of a fairly recent city, not as old like cities like Lagos, not as old as cities like Kano or Kaduna or Maiduguri and all those places. So it's fairly new. But what we have seen is that in terms of responding to climate issue, is taking the same dimension where we have a segregation of high-income neighborhood, low-income neighborhood, and all that. And the rate at which urbanization is coming up in Abuja, that dichotomy is becoming wide day after day. From what we can see on the screen, as at 2017, we can see the level of development if you are approaching Abuja from the airport. And as at 2023, we can see that the space is quite shrinking. So that means we are having more of an informal development and rapid urbanization in Abuja. And all this is an invitation to flooding. It's an invitation. What we are seeing here is that inadequate drainage system is not there. That means if there is any water that is coming from anywhere, a whole lot of places will get flooded in Abuja. So that means the ability of the infrastructure to respond to this kind of development is relatively low. So, and of course, a lot of population will be affected in terms of the health, in terms of education, in terms of transportation, everything will be affected in that regard. So, for Abuja, quite a number of efforts have been taken, which we believe can be strengthened and improved upon. And which those efforts include stronger water delivery infrastructure for the central area. That is quite stronger if you compare to any other city in Nigeria. The strategic action plan on climate change is ongoing, and investment in key transport and infrastructure asset is equally ongoing. But then the population we are seeing in Abuja is quite overwhelming to the existing infrastructure. So that means that the manager of Abuja need to really do more to really respond to climate resilient infrastructure that can withstand different risks and of course different shocks. Let's go to the next slide, please. Yes. So the next one is Lagos. Lagos, as we know, is the commercial center of the country. And I think much has been said by the Chief Resilience Officer of Lagos, of a Resilience Officer in Lagos. What Lagos is dealing with is in terms of coastal erosion, flooding, inadequacy of urban planning, high temperature. But the good thing is that efforts are being taken to really respond to some of these challenges, which include the Lagos Resilience Strategy, Climate Action Plan, Climate Adaptation and Resilience Plan, plus a rapid transportation system, and overhaul transportation system expansion, increase in housing footprint for the city, and a partnership in the water resources sector. Example is the Lagos Water Partnership being put together by the Lagos State government and different development partners. So all these are efforts that the Lagos State government is making in conjunction with the private sector and development partners, which is very key in any action or in any activity towards managing climate impact risk. Partnership is very key, collaboration is very key, and the Lagos State government is doing that very fine. So regarding the inadequate funding that the CRO mentioned, I completely agree with her that Lagos State still need more funding. When we look at the level of migration into the city, and if we look at the growth rate here, 3.2% per annum, and if we look at what the population will be by 2025, that's about 31 million people. That means a whole lot is required to be done in Lagos to be able to meet the needs of the current residents and the people who are still coming into the city. So its infrastructure needs to be strengthened. Its infrastructure needs to be more expanded. And if this will happen, more funding is required. So budgetary allocation is there to address this, but I do not think that is enough. So that means more collaboration is required, more partnership is required, more support is required, both from the federal and within and outside of the country. So you can go to the next slide.
Mr. Oshodi, just to say that you have a few minutes left, I think 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. So this is Lokoja in Kogi State, with a population of more than 800,000 people. And of course, we can see that in terms of transboundary flooding, Lokoja is in the middle of this, because that is where we have the meeting point of Benue and the Niger rivers. Low-scale infrastructure within the city to cope with the climate impact issues, and of course, high temperature and inadequacy of urban planning. They are equally taking some steps. Lokoja strategic development plan in collaboration with the Federal Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, partnership with local and international development partners, in which Arctic infrastructure is fully involved in that process. But Lokoja too needs to strengthen its infrastructure in the area of transportation, in the area of water and sanitation, and even in the area of housing. That need to be done urgently. Let's move forward. So this is a worry in Delta State. So the worry is not totally different from what other cities are experiencing. But in the area of climate risk, what is unique about a worry is that there is a hydrocarbon production facility located in Warri, which is a Warri refinery. So that means that means the carbon footprint of Warri is quite higher than any other cities mentioned earlier because of that facility. But in terms of infrastructure, Warri is not yet there as a city that we can say, yes, this city is a go-to when it comes to infrastructure, A-level infrastructure that can withstand the climate risk, because their drainage system is still something not at the optimal functionality. Let's move forward to the next level, next slide. So in all, these are the observations of what we have seen so far regarding Nigerian cities: inadequacy of climate resilience infrastructure, income segregated development approach, vulnerability of many Nigerian cities to climate risk. Many cities are responding to day-to-day basic needs. So there is no that long-term transformative plans for the cities, which can transform the infrastructure, which can transform the development process. All these things are not really in place. Then the structure of a Nigerian city and infrastructure components are low to respond and prepare for climate change impact. Substantial attention to the renewable energy sector, I must say that that is what we see in quite a number of these cities. When you talk of climate change, they quickly mention the issue of renewable energy, leaving other critical sectors like transportation, flooding, and others. Let's move to the next slide. So in our recommendations, we are suggesting integrating a climate risk into urban planning and infrastructure delivery for Nigerian cities, and holding of many states by the National Council on Climate Change. That is very key because quite a number of states are now coming up with a climate change policy, infrastructure resilience policy, but they need the guidance of a National Council on Climate Change to do this creatively. Rapid implementation of a Nigerian Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan. That master plan is wonderful, very good, very vibrant, but then implementation remains a key issue. Coordination of the private sector investment, and like I mentioned earlier, investment is still needed in many states of Nigeria. Investment is still needed, especially in Abuja and of course in Lagos, where we have a very deep development pressure in those states. Investments are needed. States and climate resilient infrastructure development fund. So one thing is about the plan. One thing is about to have the institution in place. One thing is about having the framework in place. But if there is no fund in place, all this may not materialize. So in addition to existing type of funding that we have in place, it is ideal that each state begin to consider establishing or creating a climate resilient infrastructure development fund, which will enjoy a partnership from both the private sector, the public sector, and other interested parties. So we believe that if all these things are taken into consideration, it will strengthen the ability of our Nigerian urban centers to respond to climate risk. And like I said, this is not a responsibility for the government alone. It really needs all the efforts of the government, the private sector, all interested parties need to come together because this is affecting us today, and there is no indication that everything about climate change will disappear tomorrow. So that means we need to get prepared. So all this effort, we feel that if we take them one after the other, we should be able to get our cities prepared. So let's go to the next slide, please. So at this stage, okay, let me say thank you for the opportunity to be here. I will be glad to take questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oshodi. That was really, really enlightening. And thank you so much for the case study on the different states in Nigeria. Thank you. It was really, really great, really enlightening, and it does set out indeed what we need to do, and some very interesting points that you've raised. You know, what are we focusing on? Are we, you know, is our focus? Are we focusing too much on renewable energy, or is it a blind focus? Or should we be looking at a more holistic focus? And you talked about the facts about rapid urbanization and how it's going, to which then talks when we then points out the fact that we don't seem to urbanize with some kind of planning in mind. Sometimes, even though plans exist, but I don't know, I think they get overcome. We start with plans and we don't update. Well, thank you so much, because quite apart from just talking about the challenges, you've also proposed solutions, which we'll look into. So I'm coming to my next two panelists, and particularly to Dr. Zainab at the moment. Dr. Zainab, you've heard the presentations. I hope you are still there. I see that you're muted. I'm not really seeing your video. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Zainab, and thank you for your patience. So just you've heard from the two presenters on, we've heard from the state, we've heard from
You're breaking.
yeah, from you how the ministry is positioning to ensure alignment and integration of climate resilience into planning for us as a nation. Oh, really?
Oh, so
Can anyone else
thank you
hear me?
so much.
I think it may be on your side.
Yeah,
Can you hear
thank
me
you
now?
so much.
Go ahead.
Yes, I can hear. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Loud and
Yeah,
clear.
thank you so much for
Yes.
those wonderful presentations that have been made today. The issue of climate change and climate resilience specifically is very, very key to us in the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning. Talking about coordinating resilience issues, which is, of course, mitigation and adaptation of climate change, the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning is the apex planning body in the country. What it does is that key tropical issues such as climate change, climate mitigation, adaptation, and other environmental concerns are formed as a priority to the National Development Plan. What is a priority in a plan? Priority in a plan is those things that are under the medium-term or long-term development plans that need urgent budgetary attention or provision to be able to implement them. So one of the key roles of the ministry is coordinating the ministries, departments, and agencies that have key roles to play in climate change, resilience, adaptation, and other strategic approaches towards addressing the challenge of climate change in the country. One of the key things that the ministry does is what we call the Joint Planning Board. The Joint Planning Board meeting brings together experts from the subnational level, because I'm now trying to link this coordination not only within MDAs that are doing climate change at the federal level, now to the state level. We cascade that through the Joint Planning Board meeting, where you bring on board all permanent secretaries of planning in all the 36 states of the Federation and the FCT, who bring up issues, specific issues of climate change that are being faced in those subnational levels to the federal, for us to talk about the modalities, strategies of addressing those challenges. That is one area. And some of the things, when they are not well replicated in our National Development Plan, during review processes of the plan, we also bring again together these stakeholders to see where there is gap, so that we can be able to put them into perspective in the development plan, so that it can be matched with our budget. One other key initiative of the ministry, I must say, is the issue of bringing together the heavy spenders in the budget, in the national budget, talking about the Ministry of Agriculture, Water Resources, Energy sector, etc., etc. We bring them to the round table to be able to tell them the need to include key programs and projects that address mitigation and adaptation issues, which are very, very critical, particularly with the new renewed hope agenda of Mr. President, that he's taking climate change as one of his topmost priority. So we do that through a lot of windows, apart from the Joint Planning Board meetings we hold. We have the National Economic Council meeting, where it brings together all governors of the 36 states of the Federation, all to discuss key things that relate to climate change. I'm using climate change now because that is what I'm talking about. The same with other key sectors of the Nigerian economy. So in other words, we want to see every of the critical program of climate change being included in our National Development Plan, as well as in our budgets. There is this new initiative that the Honorable Minister has tried to put, a round table that will talk about green budgeting. What are we looking at in the green budgeting? We want to look at our budgetary processes. Are we really putting the needful with respect to climate change and activities that relate to climate change? So the minister intends to bring on board the ministers of Agri, Energy Commission, Water Resources, Federal Ministry of Environment, every heavy spender that is in the green economy specialization will be on the table, so that we will now provide a way of how we can be able to allocate adequate resources for climate change and climate change activities. This is just a little of what we do in planning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zainab. Are you done? Because I see you are muted.
Yes, I think, except if there's another question that I need to answer.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that was really enlightening, and some things that we did not know. For example, I didn't know Joint Planning Board and that process, of that integrative process, of integrating both government, ministries, departments, and agencies at state and federal level. Thank you very much. My last but not least panelist, Mr. Henry Bassi. My question to you would be around stakeholder management. And you are a specialist in that with respect to climate, in respect to education. And how would you propose, because the role of the citizen is very critical. How would you propose that as a country, we integrate climate resilience in our planning and development of infrastructure? And if you have case studies that we can reference, that would also be useful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that brilliant question. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. So thanks for that brilliant question. I think it's been really exciting just listening to people come at it from different prisms. When we look at stakeholders, we're looking at the different key actors that are affected by climate change. And one of the exciting things that my sojourn in this space has shown is about the focus on catching them young. So just after COVID, the UNICEF threw out some very scary data that, in a world of where we have 2.2 billion children, Nigeria ranked second when it came to the 33 most vulnerable countries, especially who expose their children to the high risk of pollution and all the issues of coastal floods. And that in itself got us thinking at Green Hub Africa. And that is where we're able to sit with the UN and design what you call the Climate Action Superheroes syllabus. It's a syllabus that is focused on environmental education and climate literacy, but it has, the extracurricular sides of it where they are able to actually practically take actionable steps to take climate action. Because if we talk about climate change from now till tomorrow, the fundamental challenge is behavioral change. If we can change behaviors, we will truly begin to solve the issues that have to do with climate change. But then when we talk climate resilience, it's also about how you can adapt and adjust. And the issues around capacity are then put on the table. How is Nigeria, do we have the capacity to be resilient when all these shocks come? And so I would start by saying that, climate resilience literally starts with education. Because if people are educated and are knowledgeable about what to do, then they can begin to take the right steps in the right direction. If we look at the different stakeholders and the stakeholder community, they will cut across public sector, private sector, the civil society, and of course our donors, the international donors, and even the local ones. One thing that I have learned through practical hands-on experience is just taking that syllabus that we developed with the UN and deploying it in schools, primary schools, secondary schools, and we've done it all over. We've done it in over 130 schools all over the country across the 6 geopolitical zones. Now that in itself was an eye-opener because the moment we started with one of our partners, Oando Foundation, we got the last suburb, Lagos State, who tend to be first movers in most of these things, to adopt that syllabus and begin to scale it across all the schools in Lagos. This year, we've done another 70 schools with 20 in Jos. And again, Suburb, the Plateau State, have also taken it on and are scaling. But imagine if we took this across the entire country. It would really be addressing the issues from catching them young. Because as the young ones are malleable and they can adjust and form new behaviors, then they will also begin to meet all the efforts that we've listened to coming from government, coming from private sector in terms of climate resilience. I will stop here for now and happy to talk a bit more about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bassi. Thank you. Thank you. And that's really useful, the value of education in ensuring climate resilience. I'm going to come back to Dr. Dania quickly, because we have to go to questions. And please do put your questions in the chat. Dr. Dania, I want you to, from a Lagos State microcosm, just talk a little bit about how you manage to align the different, because you talked about one of your challenges being stakeholder management. I know that the Ministry for Budget and Economic Planning is your supervisory ministry. I want to understand how you have dealt with the stakeholder management issue to ensure cohesion and alignment within the state so that resilience is taken into consideration. I would like for you to also look at it from perspective of how you are also encouraging private sector investment from that cohesion. I hope I haven't asked too many questions.
Is it to Dr. Zainab now?
No, this is to Dr. Dania.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. First of all, I'd like to reiterate what Mr. Bassi spoke about a few minutes ago, and it's one thing that we've identified. Remember when I was talking about critical success factors, about mainstreaming resilience as a way of thinking, very important. Education is key. We've identified that also. And just like you said, stakeholder engagements, because we're in the Ministry of Economic Planning and Budget, as in, well, that helps our budgets as in for resilience in the state. And stakeholder engagement is what we realized is the backbone of everything that we do. Remember I mentioned earlier about how we identified shocks and stresses and how we developed the strategy. Everything came from various stakeholder engagements, from individuals, private sector, civil society, MDAs, academia, very important also. And it's something that we have previously done and will continue to do, because without the stakeholders, as in everything that you intend to do is dead on arrival if there's no buy-in. In terms of positioning, we're supervised by the Ministry of Economic Planning and Budget, which is the MDA that's responsible for planning and also allocation of resources. So that allows us to completely align in the sense that we're involved in the entire budget process. And then so we have the conversations with the government MDs, who are the stakeholders, on one hand, on how it is important for things to be included in their budget. So we have those bilateral conversations with the MDAs to ensure that they actually capture climate resilience initiatives in this instance, but beyond climate resilience initiatives that improve the resilience of the state as a whole across the 4 different dimensions of resilience, which is health and well-being, economy and society, infrastructure and environment, and leadership and strategy. Very, very important. In terms of private sector investments, as in we also work closely, as in with the Development Partnerships Department, which is also a department in the Ministry of Economic Planning and Budget that is responsible for bringing together as an investment across, whether it's the diplomatic community, whether it's private sector and the likes, to actually ensure that we're able to implement a number of projects. For Lagos State as a whole, PPP, public-private partnerships, very, very important for us. We continue to have those conversations across different platforms, whether investment forums, whether they are partnership forums and the likes, as in to ensure that we can raise the resources that we require, so whether it's human, material and the likes, because we believe that climate resilience ensures that Lagos is here in another 50 to 100 years. A few weeks ago, we still hosted the Lagos Resilience Forum, which was mainly attended by the private sector. And it's really around continuing the engagement to say, these are the things that need to happen. Government cannot do it alone. We need to partner to do this, because without the private sector, and I think government is nothing, as in without every single stakeholder that needs to be on the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel. I don't know, Dr. Zainab, did you have anything to mention, particularly about incentivizing private sector investment? Because I know you've talked about alignment, how you align within, federal MDAs and within states. Anything that you're also doing to, as the Ministry for Budget and Planning, to incentivize private investment, particularly because we know that government budgets can't do everything. Dr. Zainab, I don't know if you're still there. I'm not sure. Okay. I will segue very quickly to Mr. Oshodi. So Mr. Oshodi, you talked a lot in closing your presentation. Mr. Oshodi, are you there? Just want to be sure that you're there before I reel out your question. If you can just respond.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
You talked a lot about in closing. You talked about the fact that the private sector is really critical in bringing about planning and adapting for climate resilience. What from your view, looking at projects and things that you work on are very key? If you can just tell us in a minute or two, key considerations from a private sector perspective that will incentivize private sector. You talked about the fact that we are talking a lot about renewable energy and not some other critical areas. So what should government be doing to incentivize private sector in these other not so interesting and not so popular sectors, but are really critical?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, like I mentioned in that closing part of the presentation, one thing is to have all the framework, and one thing is to have all the institutions and, of course, the policies in place. Funding remains a very key issue. Two things that we want a private sector to be well incentivized is that one, in the area of capacity. On the government side, there is need to really build and strengthen the capacity. On the private sector side, there is that need to build and strengthen the capacity. For example, if we look at the quantum of housing that we deliver today in this country, and if we look at the quantum of a transportation system that we make work in this country as at today, it is really less when we compare it with other economy that we are maybe at relatively the same level in terms of housing delivery and in terms of transportation, even in the area of energy as well. So that means there is a less for our private sector to really do. And the more you do, the more expertise you gain, the more experience you gain. For example, if we are looking at water engineers in Nigeria and things like that, we have them in short supply because we do not have extensive water treatment or large-scale water production facility in different parts of the country. So that means over the years, the expertise that Nigerians should gain are not really there because we are not practicing real large-scale urban water delivery system. And the same thing is applicable in the area of housing. For example, if you take some countries where housing production is about maybe 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 units in a year, compared to where you do 200 or 150 units in a year. So that means there is a need to really begin to upskill our private sector to be able to handle this large flux of development when the time comes. But to really get to this point, I think funding is very key for the private sector. It's a very challenging aspect. And if you look at some of the cities I shown the other time, they are like a low-rise city. Transformative development is not really happening in those cities. And I keep saying that you cannot develop any vibrant city based on a 25% interest rate being charged by the commercial banks. No city can thrive in that environment. So you need you need access to funding. 1%, 0.5% interest rate. these are some of the things that developed countries have been able to use in maximizing the efficiency of their cities. So private sectors are the key drivers of some of this investment that we see in collaboration with government in some cases in any way. So, but funding infrastructure development fund, I think it should be a priority that the private sector could latch on to. And with what we had from the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, I think there is an opportunity for the ministry to take this head on and be able to give that leadership in creating this type of funding. 0.5%, 1%, 2%. I don't know how the mathematics will work, but if this could happen, it goes a long way in bringing out many of the projects in the pipeline of the private sector that they've been there. They do not know how to execute them, whether in the area of energy, whether in the area of transportation, whether in the area of water, whether in the area of sanitation. Funding, access to funding is very key, and not just any funding of 25%, 20%. That cannot sustain our urban infrastructure. That cannot deliver our urban infrastructure. But funding that is creative, that is quite friendly, that is quite accessible, it will go a long way in making the private sector work and deliver on the priority of our infrastructure.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oshodi. So two major things. One, capacity, both on private and public sector side, and more importantly, concessional financing. Even I am not sure about the 1% or the 0.5, but I totally agree with you. And there's something else that you have mentioned during your presentation about states, setting up funds specifically, to ensure that they're able to meet climate resilience plans. Thank you very, very much. Mr. Bassi, did you have something to say? I see you are putting on your video.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think that
Yeah.
it's really about strategic alliances and collaborations. If we're doing a lot of silos, and if we can come together, then I think the opportunities are enormous. Yeah.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I will take questions. I hear that the representative of the Honorable Minister for the Environment is here. We will take a short address from him after we take the questions so that I can let my panelists go. We have a number of comments / questions here. I'll just take them quickly, and maybe for those that are not allocated to anyone, I may just call on any of the panelists or any of the panelists who has something to say there. The first is from Marvels. I never knew that Nigeria is really serious about the environment. In my opinion, I believe that the private sector has a major role to play, but based on my recent findings, it seems that the enforcement of regulation seems to be weak. What is doing to ensure that private sector takes responsibility to addressing environmental issues more seriously? Because I think that we've kind of addressed the issues. We've talked about solutions. If you even listen to Mr. Oshodi and Mrs. Dania, you'd see that there being solutions there. Mr. Adebo Odularu has an interesting question. How do we leverage the power of digital access and phone ownership to enhance climate resilience and generate climate finance? Maybe there's a product there, but I don't know if anybody has any of our panelists has any responses there, or maybe there is a product in the making there. And he had a question specifically for Mr. Bassi. I think I just went over it now. He says, "Great work, Henry. Please do you have initiatives for unschooled children like IDP inhabitants that we can collaborate with you on?" So, Mr. Henry Bassi, can you respond to that?
Yes, so we do. So what it is we've developed this syllabus that cuts across primary school, secondary school, and the youths in universities and tertiary institutions. But because we've done this across the country, for example, one of the things we picked up when we were in the north, in Borno to be precise, was that we focused and we saw the need for the girl child to be climate literate, to also understand how she can begin to understand the issues that have to do with recycling, upcycling, and make something out of it. And that in itself opened us to see what else was happening around the IDP camp. So we can tweak the product to fit the IDP camps. And I will share my contacts for us to carry on this conversation. So it's doable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bassi.
I was going to quickly answer the Badewo's question. In fact, there are multiple ways by which you can leverage the power of digital access and food and ownership. And depending on where you come at it from, whether it's in terms of data collection, whether it's in terms of information management, whether it's in terms of service delivery. Example for which could be waste management. How do people pick up waste, as in recycling, waste that has been sorted? Depending on how you look at it, sorry, I just realized my camera was off. Depending on how you look at it, there are multiple ways as in by which we can leverage the power of digital access. It depends on how you want to, which of the problems as in you are determined to solve. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Daniel. Thank you very much for that response. There's a question about the upcoming summit, if it's virtual or physical. I think there are two. I think you can have both options. I think virtual more feasible. I'd leave for Dr. Etwa or maybe Essie to respond to that maybe at the end of, just for as a reminder at the end of the session. Anonymous attendee. Sorry, this thing keeps going up and down. Just 1 minute, please. Concerning the estimated loss that Nigeria may be facing, which was also mentioned by one of the panelists, of up to 150 billion by 2050. What is the plan of Ministry of Budget and Planning to ensure this is mitigated? What approaches have been taken? I believe that Dr. Zainab has spoken to that. Maybe this was sent before Dr. Zainab's intervention.
Sorry,
okay,
what's the question?
He's just asking what actions are being taken to mitigate possible or potential losses to climate change. And I think that from a planning perspective, you've spoken to that. But I have a question that is directed at you. From Chike Ukwe. He says, while joint planning with subnational governments is great, is there any mechanism for ensuring follow-up and coordination with subnational governments? Sorry, we went up again. Yes.
I should answer that.
Yes, ma'am. In implementation of approved plans and monitoring. So do you have any plan for monitoring and evaluation?
Yeah, sure. There is always a way of following up of implementation. Decisions taken at joint planning board meetings, National Council on Development Planning, and the National Economic Council are all programs and projects to be implemented. And it is an activity that goes on year in, year out, every year. At the next joint planning board meeting, every state will give a report of what they have done so far with respect to whatever it is that has been decided at the session. So it's a continuous and a permanent body. And that is one of the strong anchor of planning, that we don't want to lose count of any. In fact, what I did not mention when I was making a presentation is even our liaison with the private sector, which, as everybody has spoken today, is very key. So even within the joint planning board, private sector operators are part of that body that take decisions on things that relate to climate change, preparedness, etc., depending on what is on the table. So yes, there's usually a follow-up at the next meeting to find out what has been done and what has not been done and why it has not been done. And one of the very reasons why we have all these joint bodies come together, like I said, is for the purpose of funding, because most of the activities are not being implemented. One of the reasons is there is no fund. So if we don't even know that it's a priority coming from the state or priority coming from the MDAs that are anchoring climate change, how then can we be able to appropriate for it? So those joint bodies are very, very important in addressing this mitigation and adaptation issues and climate change resilience generally.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. That's very insightful. Dr. Daniel, there's a question here for you. How does the Lagos State Resilience Office relate from Halima Bawa Buhari? How does the Lagos State Resilience Office relate with the Lagos Waterfront Management Office and other related MDs? I think you've kind of spoken to it a bit, but do you want to speak to this Lagos Waterfront Management Office? Because it seemed like it was the reason for...
Okay, thank you very much. So we didn't go through the Lagos Resilience Strategy as a document because we didn't have time for that. But one of the initiatives in the strategy is actually implemented by the Lagos State Ministry of Waterfront Infrastructure and Infrastructure Development. So Lagos State Resilience Office does not implement any project, but we drive implementation through various MDAs. And one of the things that we've identified for us to build resilience for the Ministry of Waterfront Infrastructure Development is development, first of all, of an integrated coastal zone management plan. We need that for Lagos. We've had interventions in place as in to protect the coast, but we need a plan that is more integrated, that looks beyond just great infrastructure, but also looks at green infrastructure, how we protect the biodiversity along those lines, and ensure that we actually build climate resilience and not just put in place infrastructure because we think that it should be there. So, and also guides them in terms of how do they protect biodiversity while building infrastructure along the waterfront. So we work with various MDAs across transportation, health, environment, physical planning, amongst others, to ensure that we're able to implement resilience building initiatives for Lagos State. So if you just go online and you Google the Lagos Resilience Strategy, you actually find the document online that actually outlines the different initiatives that we proposed for Lagos to be resilient at the time. The Lagos Resilience Strategy will actually be reviewed next year because it's not a static document, but we expect it to always align with current realities for the state. There's also another question that I saw, and I think I should just answer it right now. I think somebody identified the gaps in how do we talk about funding for initiatives in Lagos. We recently developed and publicly released in June the Lagos State Climate Adaptation and Resilience Plan. And the plan mainly focuses on what are the different funding mechanisms that exist for us as a state. How do we look at blended finance? How do we look at loans, grants, and the likes? And then, so how do we access funding that helps us implement this project, mainly green projects, as in that we've identified as a state beyond renewables? So that is also available online. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel. You actually have two more questions. If you can just take them in very short bursts. One was talking about the fact that, okay, oh, I'm sorry, this thing just keeps jumping all over the place. The fact that right now there's still a lot of encroachment going on by real estate, from real estate. Sorry, I'm just looking for the question because I read it so many times and then it's escaped me. Okay, we talked about the importance of we talked about the importance of integrating climate resilience in urban planning. However, land reclamation and encroachment into the lagoon and wetlands in states like Lagos is still massively ongoing due to rapid urbanization and real estate development. What's the drive? So I don't know if you can respond from the Lagos perspective. What's the drive for implementation of existing policies? So how are you dealing with that rapid urbanization?
Thank you very much. So yes, rapid urbanization, there's a lot of informal settlements, as in there are people that are encroaching on places that they shouldn't be. I'm sure you've seen over time, you've seen the Commissioner for Ministry of Environment and Water Resources and the team going out to actually remove houses that are actually encroaching or are on the drains or the canals and causing flooding in Lagos State. So whilst there are plans, as in the operative fiscal development plans for the states that people are supposed to align with, unfortunately, as in which is sad to say, we don't have enough manpower to actually monitor a lot of the encroachments as they happen. But once they're identified, a lot of times they are removed. I know people say we should be able to do them real time, but unfortunately, that's not the case. And that's why you find that somebody has built a house somewhere where it's not supposed to be. And then a few months later, or it might even be a year later, then some task force identifies it and they remove the property. It shouldn't be so. We're putting in place, as in technology, as the other person mentioned at the time, to help us identify those developments as they happen. We're not there yet. Those things are still in process, but we hope that very soon we'll be able to identify them before they happen and actually take it or stop them as in before they go forward. There are also instances where some places have already been identified. So there's some places that have been identified already by the New Towns Development Agency. And yes, they're supposed to build there, but it's how they're supposed to build, as in that has been identified. And sometimes even that is not followed, unfortunately. So, but for some developments, they're actually planned. Some are unplanned, and it's unfortunate, but that's the reality of where we are. We understand that there's lack of affordable housing. That's another complex issue, as in for the state. And that is why you find people going into a lot of those informal settlements. Do we have all the answers? The answer is no. Are we trying to improve and actually reduce the rate at which it is happening? The answer is yes. And we hope that we'll get there eventually. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Daniel. Someone was asking what social media handles you use to engage citizens. So maybe you can just type that in the chat whilst I go to Mr. Henry Bassi. He says, well, he's saying, how can the Sustainability Policy Commission, well, I'm thinking, let me rephrase the question. How can we ensure that individual climate change initiatives are promoted to create awareness regarding climate change? He says, for instance, part of a team that is currently running a 100-day online awareness campaign. How can initiatives like this be supported for more awareness creation? So I guess he's looking for guidance.
Yes,
on individual.
Yeah. Let me first of all commend the 100-day online climate challenge. It's a step in the right direction. But the one thing that I've also realized is that when we talk climate change, most people think it's, foreign, and it's happening right at their backyards. But there's that association with climate change being foreign, and what's my business? I've not finished having 3 square meals, so why should I be bothered? But it's happening in our backyards, and so I must commend the online climate challenge that he's doing. But it has to be done, first of all, in a way that resonates with your target audience. So it's important that you know who you're speaking to. And then it's also important you speak to them in a language they understand. If it means translations into local dialects, it's definitely the route to go. Because climate change and the science of it and climate resilience sometimes can fly above our heads. Just listening to the awesome work that the Resilient Office is doing. And, she touched on biodiversity. All those buzzwords can fly above people's heads. So it's important that we demystify it by simplifying it and getting people to see themselves in the conversation. So if people can begin to see what is in it for them, then they would appreciate the campaign you're running, and they will then begin to take climate action. There are also strategies around how you can focus and ensure that you're not putting out too much information at the same time, so that people will take it in bite sizes, and then they can begin to take measurable action. And then, of course, there's rewarding them for taking that action. So, for example, at Green Hub Africa, we celebrate the World Environment Day every year with the UN. It's an event that is hosted in the UN House. Now, that event showcases the top climate schools of the year. So in all that we do across the syllabus, there's, for example, the establishment of the environmental clubs, and the clubs are responsible for growing the gardens and planting the trees. The yields from the gardens are taken as entries into the competition. And then, this is just one of the different aspects. of the program that is then looked at critically and rewarded for that action. And so you then end up having the top climate smart school competition at the end of the year, and they're rewarded at that event on World Environment Day. And we have, you know, the audience of people like the resident coordinator of the UN attending and rewarding. So people must see that there's something in it for them as you run your challenge, as you run your campaigns, and make sure that it resonates with them. If you're speaking to the North, and they're dealing with the issues of drought and deforestation, then let it target those subjects, because it will mean more than if you were dealing with issues of maybe floods or gully erosions in the Southeast. That would be my advice, but I'm happy to talk about this a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bassi. Thank you. And I'm sure that he is going to reach out to you. Dr. Lena, please, I see that you're about to leave. Please, I have a question for you, which I think is interesting, from Hannah Balogun. Having seen that FARC has been approved for local governments across the nation, I'm wondering if the Federal Ministry of Planning and Budget and Planning will be playing any role in ensuring that LGAs utilize a good percentage of the funds for climate compliant projects. I don't know if Dr. Zainab is still there. Oh, looks like she's gone. But that's a very interesting question. And just to remind us that I had mentioned at the beginning that one of the things that we're doing as a policy option, I don't know if Dr. Daniel had a response to that from a Lagos State perspective, but I just wanted to say that one of the things that we're looking to do is actually have some policy reform around climate resilience and aim to hopefully guide governments in doing this. So that probably will be one of the things that we will tackle. There was also a question about, just getting to it now.
Yeah, the last one, just to say that the minister's rep has been waiting.
The minister's, yes, he's here. Okay. Okay.
So we have,
I think we can. I just wanted to be sure that I don't miss anyone's question. Yes.
Can I quickly answer that? So we've begun to advocate, as in conduct advocacy, as into the local governments, as in to ensure that they begin to incorporate a lot of this climate resilience and other resilience initiatives into their budgets. So we've had various levels of advocacy visits. We've begun to have sensitization programs even for their budgets and planning officers, as in at the local government level, so that they understand what it is that we want them to do. Because just like Mr. Bassi mentioned, stakeholder engagement is the way to go. If people do not understand what it is that you want them to do and why it is that it's important, why it is important that they do so, then you just be wasting your time. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. We will be inviting the Assistant Director Monitoring and Evaluation from the Ministry of Environment to give his address before we close. Mr. Simon Ezinko, you have the floor, sir. And apologies for keeping you waiting. Your volume is very low, sir. No.
Let me see. Can you hear me now?
Better. Yes, yes.
Oh, wonderful. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm here to represent the Honorable Minister of Environment, Mr. Balarabe Abbas Lawal, and he would have loved to be here, but for exigencies of duty. So he has given me a short remark, an address to present, and I'll be brief about it. You've just reminded me that I have 10 minutes. It's okay. So I want to thank, appreciate, or recognize rather, the organizers of this webinar, as well as the distinguished panelists, the climate experts on this, and all participants. Thank you for for giving this opportunity. Quickly, I will read the minister's remarks. Nigeria faces significant threats from climate change, including natural disasters like floods and coastal erosion, which impact the economy, environment, and vulnerable populations. In 2022, catastrophic floods highlighted the nation's vulnerability. The Niger Delta is affected by rising sea levels and pollution, while desertification and gully erosion threaten other regions. The country's reliance on climate-sensitive sectors such as agriculture and oil exacerbates these challenges. Addressing climate change requires a holistic approach, including infrastructure development, ecosystem restoration, and effective governance. Leveraging technology and innovation, such as climate-smart agriculture and resilient infrastructure, is crucial. I want to thank NESG, especially its Sustainability Policy Commission, for this presummate event aimed at galvanizing action, developing strategic plans, and fostering public-private partnerships to build a resilient and prosperous Nigeria. Collective action is essential for creating a sustainable future. I thank you all. Thank you so much. That's the minister's speech. And I want to once more say thank you for the organizers, NESG, for this presummate. It's a wonderful opportunity. And I heard from the I think the Dr. Kukoyi, I heard she was talking about policy reform, and we'll be eagerly awaiting recommendations from this session, so that it could aid the ministry in these policy reforms. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Ezinko. Thank you for conferring me with a doctorate, which I gladly accept.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
So just to bring our panel session to a close, I want to say thank you so much to our panelists. They have really done justice to the topic, and we will definitely be engaging you as we go forward in this work. Policy reform is it's a marathon, nothing like a sprint at all. There's so much work that needs to be done, and as you'd have seen from the presentations, the scale of the problem and even the latest intervention, the scale of the problem is really large. You know, we need all hands on deck. So I wanted to say thank you again to Dr. Dania. Thank you to Mr. Oshobi. Thank you to Dr. Zainab, who had to rush off. And many thanks to Mr. Henry Batsi, and also to Mr. Simon Zinko, who still was able to make it. Thank you for honoring our invitation, and thank you for showing up for us, and we all work towards reform, institutional and legal framework reform and policy reform as well. Over to you, Dr. Itwa. Thank you.
Wow. That was a master stroke. Thank you very much for the beautiful way you moderated the panel, and indeed our distinguished panelists. You were so wonderful. Thank you very much for those beautiful statements from you, the action point you have actually brought out. Thank you so much. And just to say, in my closing remark is collectively, I think we have had a profoundly insightful, engaging discussion on building climate resilience in Nigeria. The breadth and depth of perspective shared today, for me, are invaluable to our collective efforts. The challenges we face are immense, but so too is our potential to overcome them. the ideas and strategies presented here offer a clear path or pathway towards a more resilient Nigeria. It is evident that a multifaceted approach, encompassing infrastructure, ecosystem restoration, community empowerment, sound policy, and indeed international cooperation is essential. I commend the contributions of our panelists and participants. Your expertise and passion have enriched our understanding of the issues at hand. It is imperative that we translate these discussions into concrete actions. As we conclude this session, I urge all to continue this important dialogue within your respective spheres of influence. Let us work together to advocate for policies that prioritize climate resilience, mobilize resources, and foster partnerships. And indeed, I know you all have talked about strategic alliance, cooperation, partnership. You emphasize that in all your statements. And to let you know that one of the things that Nigeria is doing today is the NDC implementation stocktake, climate action stocktake for Nigeria. NDC stocktake, or rather NDC implementation stocktake, and including other climate action. The National Council on Climate Change is on that at present. And I do hope you will be reached shortly because we are supporting in getting that stocktake to be in shape. So you'll be reached by the respective authority and then be part of the conversation. And you recall that even what we're talking about, part of the long-term vision of this strategy, it actually captured all of this, some of these issues. And interestingly, Henry Bassi is doing a job that tends to bring the NDC and the long-term strategy, fusing them together so that we can implement holistically. And so we all join efforts to work together to see that continuously we see this robust action in our climate activities. Nigeria's future depends on our ability to adapt to the changing climate. By building resilience, we are not only safeguarding our environment, but also creating a sustainable foundation for economic growth and social well-being. Once again, thank you all for your participation. Our co-chair, Mr. Osagie Okunbo, thank you so much. And then our distinguished Honorable Minister, who was ably represented, Federal Minister of Environment, we want to also thank you. Personally, I look forward to witnessing the tangible outcomes of our deliberations. If you have not registered, but of course, have this in mind, that the 30th Nigeria Economic Summit is coming up. Collaborative action for growth, stability, and competitiveness. That is what we look forward to witnessing. It will speak to issues that have inhibited Nigeria's trajectory to growth, stability, and competitiveness in many respects. And again, like I said earlier, we've taken just a figment of all the challenges we're facing. Let's continue the conversation and bring out real outcome that can support the nation. Thank you and have a very beautiful evening. Bye for now. I suggest if we can, if it's possible for us to turn our camera on, let's turn it on and take a group photograph, if that is possible. Essie, do we have that opportunity to do that?
No, sir. Can we have Mr. Lukman, can you have your camera on, please? Dr. Olayinka, can you have your camera on,
I've been
please?
trying to do that for some time. I really don't know what happened with my settings.
It's only my camera that's on. I suggest we all put on. Mr. Okunbo, please, your camera, sir.
No,
It's not possible?
At my hand, I think it's pretty difficult. It's saying there are some other apps that are open and I need to close them, but I really can't figure out any
Okay,
app.
I think we can see your name, and so
Okay.
your name will represent you.
That's fine.
Yeah. And we can see the smiles. Okay, I think it's coming up more. Mr. Okubo, I don't know if you can join us with your smile, sir, if it's possible. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a very beautiful evening. Dr. Daniel, a number of persons online said they want to have some talk with you on how they can build resilience in their community. I hope you will share your details so that they can reach you. Mr.
I've
Simeon,
responded
thank
to
you.
a number of people in the group chat.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Henry, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Dolapo,
Thank you.
All right.
thank
Yeah,
you.
bye. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, sir.
Have a beautiful evening. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.